Hello, my name is Julie, and today I'm going to be telling you which book I think should win the Hugo Award. I have always wanted to be one of those people who really closely follows awards. The person who watches all of the movies nominated for Best Picture, all of the musicals that are nominated for Best New Musical, all of the books that are nominated for XYZ award. And I'm not that person. I just like paying attention to those races because a lot of the times the awards don't actually matter. But I think it's interesting. I think awards are an interesting thing about humanity. And the closest I get in the reading sphere is doing the Goodreads Choice Awards. A couple months ago, out of curiosity, just decided to look up who won the Hugo for the 2025 releases. Turns out they don't even happen until August, so the nominations were out. I looked at the nominations, and it turns out that I had read all but 2 of the nominees, so I thought, why don't I read those last 2 and tell you which one I think will win and which one I think should have won. Since time has passed, I've actually forgotten what books were nominated other than the ones that I had not read. I have an idea of 2 of them, I think. So I'm going to give you my second look at these Hugo nominees. I'll tell you which ones I've read, I'll read the ones I haven't, and then I'll give you my full thoughts on all of them. And I also want to do a little bit of research about what makes the Hugos tick, what makes it different from other fantasy awards, and is it one that I tend to agree with? Here are the finalists. So this was published on April 21st, and the awards are going to happen, I believe, August 30th. I am reading this in July. The first nominee is A Drop of Corruption by Robert Jackson Bennett, which is one of the ones that I just straight up remembered. I did know that for a fact. I have read that book, and I actually was not a big fan of The Tainted Cup, like literally everybody else in the fantasy sphere, but I decided to give the second book another shot, and I get the hype now. I actually did really enjoy that one, and I thought the mystery was just purely better. Next up, we have Death of the Author by Nnedi Okorafor, which is one of the ones that I forgot. Completely forgot that that book came out last year and all of that with it, because I'm more of a fantasy person than a sci-fi person, but I have read that book and I did enjoy it. It's got a lot to chew on. I thought that it was going to be a shoo-in for a lot of awards, but either it hasn't been winning much or the awards haven't happened yet. It didn't win the Goodreads Choice Award for sci-fi. I don't remember what did. Oh, The Compound did. I love The Compound. I would not be surprised if this one took it. Then we have Shroud by Adrian Tchaikovsky, which is one of the books that I have not read. Not only that, I had not heard of it before the awards. I don't know what it's about. All I know is that it's a sci-fi. It has to do with the rocket ship or maybe aliens or something. And I also am familiar with Adrian Tchaikovsky generally. I've never read a book by him before, so I'm going into this knowing literally nothing. Have not seen a single review of this book at all. Next up is The Everlasting by Alix Harrow. Dude, no, I had no idea. Okay. Oh, this might be a tighter race for me emotionally than I was ready for, because The Everlasting, it should have made my best books of 2025, and I don't know why I didn't include it. I have recommended this book to so many people. It's so great on so many different levels. Like, it's kind of how Will of the Many hits so many different types of fan of books. This does the same thing. I really love that book. This might be my pick for what should win. Next up, we have The Incandescent by Emily Tesh, which is the other one that I have not read. I have it right here. As the top of this book says, she has actually already won the Hugo Award with Some Desperate Glory, which is a sci-fi book I had interest in, but don't know a whole lot about. This is a book that did get nominated for the Goodreads Choice Awards. It is one of the few I got wrong. I had just left it off of my list. I know this is a dark academia fantasy that's taking place at a magical school, but instead of our main character being a student, she is a teacher, which I think could be a pretty interesting angle. I haven't heard reviews of this book. I've just kind of seen it around. I'm waiting on the one that I remember seeing. The Raven Scholar by Antonia Hodgeson is our next one, and that's the one that I did remember other than Drop of Corruption. This is the one going into this video I kind of think is going to be the winner. All of these obviously have a chance, but the Raven Scholar felt new to me as a veteran fantasy reader. I genuinely think it's just so good, and this was a Cinderella story of absolutely only word of mouth made this book as popular as it was. And is that it? That is it. So there were 6 nominees. I've already read 4 of them. Let's see what I think of the remaining nominees. Howdy, I have read the first 100 pages of the Incandescent, and I'll tell you, it has not felt like 100 pages. Like, I know I pushed hard to actually read that much. If I would have just stopped yesterday when I just wanted to fall asleep, it would have been like page 60 or something like that. It feels like I've read like maybe 50. This is a dark academia that is actually set like in the present, in the real world, but magic is an academic pursuit. I feel like we've all read a couple books like that. This definitely has the same flavor as the real world portions of Catabasis do. Our main character is Dr. Walden. She is a magician whose primary focus is invocation, so summoning demons. There are 3 different fields of magic. There are people who have, studied magic and therefore gotten their magical abilities, but there are some people who are so powerful that they start showing magical abilities without studying it. So that sort of flavor of like, the D&D technicalities of magic users has been interesting. But this is set at a school in England, a middle school / high school. I'm not up on all the terminology of the different levels of school in England. I just know about A levels and GCSE. She is the main teacher for the higher level students. We've gotten a little bit of her backstory. At the beginning of this book, her students are doing this test where they are trying to summon a small demon, and one of them sort of hesitates and he doesn't really recognize his own power, and he has summoned the very, very big deal demon that has kind of plagued the school for many centuries, but it hasn't been seen in like 20 years or something like that. Now Dr. Walden is going to have to deal with that, and she's also working alongside these people who are like magical bodyguards essentially to try to protect people from demons. They're not like academically trained, but they are in combat. Our main character is a little bit frustrated, but definitely thinks that the bodyguard lady is very hot. I have been enjoying this so far. The thing I've liked about this is I've liked the amount of like lore dumping, world building, whatever, of just like telling us about how the school works and like how long things have been around, how the magic works. I've just been enjoying, this is an interesting setup of magic, and the way that they're talking about magic integrating with the real world, I think has been interesting. The phoenix on the cover, which is supposed to be like a tattoo on her, hasn't come up yet, even though it's like the first sentence of the synopsis, which I thought was interesting. I just need to actually sit myself down, and today we had off from work because it's July 3rd, right before July 4th. I have the rest of the evening to do this, but we just went and did a ton of errands. The 2 of us went to a coffee shop and got some stuff done. We were outside for a while, went to the bookstore, got some gifts for people, had to go get a measuring tape because I broke mine, and then go get groceries. So it has been like 5 hours of being outside hot. Also, I got a scam call saying that I missed jury duty and I was wanted. It took me a while, but I was like, this does not sound right. I'm hot and sweaty. I'm gonna like go take a shower and then be cozy with my book, hopefully for a good amount of the night. Hello, I am currently working on my next crochet project, which is coming way too soon after my last ones. I am watching John Green's VOD of one of his streams of doing Red Dead Redemption 2, and I'm here to update you on the Incandescent. I got to the 250 mark last night. I should have gotten to 300, I think, if I was on track. I have had this feeling with like a different fantasy book that I read this year. This book feels like it's supposed to be a trilogy. The end of the first act, like the thing that happens, feels like what would happen at the end of a first book in a series. The plot of this second act feels like the second book in a series, and I'm just like, it's such a weird feeling because like at the beginning of this book, I'm feeling like it's so detailed in how it's talking about the school and everything, and then like, oh wow, big stakes thing happens. Britt, it feels like we're not quite invested enough in all these big things. There's a somewhat romance plot going on in here, and the way that it kicked off felt like it came kind of out of nowhere. Like, despite our main character like being like, oh my god, she's so hot, there's a new character who's been introduced who I do not like, and I'm not supposed to like, but I think that the way that this character is being introduced and talked about just feels really stereotypical, like the type of character that you, the audience, know is going to be bad news, but the main character is just like, la-di-da, I'm sure it's fine. Good news is that my audiobook hold of this book did come in, so I have been able to immersive read, and I do like the narration of it. Very British. The thing I would say that I really like about this book is it being about being a teacher. Sometimes when a fantasy book has like the main character has a job, sometimes the job like doesn't matter that much. And honestly, that's not just a fantasy thing. This is the thing I've noticed in romance books a lot recently is like, she's a this, he's a that. And like the that doesn't matter at all to the plot. This is a dark academia in which the main characters are not students, they're teachers. And I think it's really interesting to see that sort of environment from the other perspective. One of the pitches of this says Scholomance meets Plain Bad Heroines. I've not read the Scholomance. I don't really have a lot of interest in it, but Plain Bad Heroines is a book that I really enjoyed because there is also a point of view in that book that is the teachers of a girls' school in the past. We finally did have the relevance of the Phoenix and what that situation is. I don't know how I'm going to feel about that paying off because that plot could go in one of two directions, and one of them I've seen a million times before, and the other is if we do something a little bit different. So I hope that ends up happening. Oh my God. I'm finally able to sneeze without fully hurting myself after I was away from Ariel for 2 weeks. And oh my God, my abs hurt so bad. I can't cough or sneeze without discomfort, but that one was okay. I'd actually like to hear more about what is the outside world like outside of the school. We've gotten a little bit, but what is the average everyday person doing magically? Are there magical devices that are being used at all? Is that just not part of it? I really like how the main character is really looking after her students and wanting the best things for them and talking about how different students need different ways to be encouraged. I like that a lot. And I think that that is the reason I would push somebody towards this book. I'm hoping that I end up liking how the fantasy plot comes along. And I don't know why I'm finding myself having less to say about it. I have finished The Incandescent, and it is absolutely shocking me how little I have to say about this book. I was really anticipating this being a book I was super interested in, and at the beginning of the book, I thought that the way that we were introducing information, just how we're building everything out, felt interesting. And as the book went along, I just think it doesn't end up feeling like a fully finished work. I don't feel like I have a good understanding of the magic system beyond just invoking demons. I don't really know what the other magics are capable of. The things that we get about the demons I think are pretty cool. Basically, they have this tiered system of demons where it's the higher up a demon is in level, the harder it is for them to get in, the more powerful they are, the harder they are to invoke. But little tiny demons can get in anywhere, and they're attracted to magic and magic users, as well as technology and just anything that could have some sort of personification to it. There is a little imp that ends up getting into the printer. When people talk to the printer when it's not working, come on, man, that sort of thing. It brings a personification to the printer that a demon then will inhabit. And then that demon in the printer decides to go on strike and is you have to feed me good paper or whatever the deal is. That stuff I think is cute, and it definitely gives a range of the different feelings you can have towards this magic of oh, there's can be big scary things, but there can also be small small little things, and it just gave like an interesting flavor to the school that was sort of going on. That aside, it doesn't seem to me like there's a huge purpose for invoking a higher level demon. And I really anticipated that at the beginning of the book, we get to see this big demon that shows up. I really thought that there was going to be more to like the student connection to the demon. I thought that there was going to be a little bit more of a depth of the plot line of the main student that we're talking about. I didn't think that her payoff was great. She gets frustrated with stuff and she's like, I don't want to go to fancy school anymore. And they're like, well, you should go to fancy school. And she's like, okay. It was Oxford, if you cared. And there was a different character who's very clearly like not a good person, who we spend so much time on. And I just think interacting with that character was so deeply uninteresting because it's so obvious. And shocker, they did the thing that was bad. There was no other culprit. There was nobody else who could have done something. The third act, the things that change about our main character, that is a particular plot line that I've seen done before and never really been in love with. And I think that that's something that I could have told from the synopsis was going to happen to her, and that I do think I was a little bit apprehensive about going into that plot. That third act didn't totally work for me. I think some people are going to be really in love with like the narrative choices that are made in the third act. I'm trying to be so vague without spoiling stuff, but like everything feels so obvious. But I have seen that exact same thing done differently and way better in a different nominee for this same award. Like one of the other books in here does the same thing that this book does with shocking similarity. Obviously, they didn't copy each other. They came out within months of each other, but it just like made me disappointed. Another thing that makes me disappointed, I mentioned it before. I talked about the student, but I didn't talk about the love interest. Love interest is barely on page, and I don't understand why I should be rooting for their relationship because like other than they think each other is hot, they like don't really talk to each other that much, and it was just really frustrating. You're trying to sell me on a romantic relationship without actually doing the legwork to do it. It just felt to me like this was originally supposed to be an entire series, and the author was told, no, you have to make it one book. And so like each of the three acts kind of feels like its own thing that could have been its own book. The adjustment between them doesn't feel as neat. This just doesn't feel as lived in or deep or whatever as I would have liked from this book. So the content here, not bad. I just wish that this was expanded upon. So this was honestly a letdown for me. This was one that I did think I was going to like. The things that it does on paper are good, but I just don't think it executed on everything as well as I wanted it to. So that's a bit disappointing, but let's get on to Shroud so we can finish our last book and talk about the Hugos. One day I'm gonna have like a real tripod and a real camera, and I won't have to like get different things around my room to be a tripod. I have not spent any of my YouTube money yet. Most of that money does come from one video, but I have never spent anything, and I actually am saving up for a camera and all the accoutrements, so one day, that'll be soon. But today, I have gotten to page 160 of 436 of Shroud. So our main character is Juna, and she is a part of this crew on this spaceship. They have been awakened from cryo sleep in order to be people who explore planets that humans might be able to live on. They have been assigned to this moon, technically, that they call Shroud. It is incredibly dense. There's no light down there because of the atmosphere. They end up finding these weird signals coming off of it that are just constant and on like every radio band. And so they keep sending probes down there. They seem to find something that appears to be like life down there. And then quickly there is a disaster that happens, and some of our crew finds themselves on that moon in unlivable conditions for humans, except for the fact that they're within this little pod. I'm debating how how much I want to say about this book because there are things that are not in the synopsis. Juna is the main perspective we follow, but we occasionally follow chapters from some of the creatures that are on the planet that are having a communication problem. They have figured out that there is some sort of intelligence to the other, but they cannot communicate yet. I've never read an Adrian Tchaikovsky before. I am familiar with the Children of Time series and have been vaguely interested in it before. I have since looked through the Hugos list. In 2024, I also read 4 out of the 6 nominees, and the only 2 I had not read were Adrian Tchaikovsky novels. My immediate impression of this book is this is like hard science fiction without a lot of breathing room. If you've read, let's say, Project Hail Mary, right? Which, by the way, nominated for the Hugo and lost. It should have won. And you saw all the science in that and you were so excited by the science of that book. But you want a book that also does not have the humor of Andy Weir and does not have memorable root for characters. If you just want hard science fiction, and honestly, it's a bit much for me. So much of it is coming across as technobabble to me. Density. It's not necessarily in any one specific thing that it's saying. It's just the volume of science stuff that we're talking about, right in a row. And I'm like, this is supposed to be fun. This isn't fun. This book is honestly kind of putting me to sleep. I was so excited to see that the print was pretty big in this book and that it doesn't feel like it. Dude's got a big vocabulary and is really flaunting that, I think. It's not fully enough to dock at any points, but it's not my favorite writing style. Our main character, Juna, was on this ship as the assistant to the captain and essentially the understudy for any given role. She's not a specialist, she's a generalist, but she's also mainly supposed to be the mediator on the craft who would make sure that nobody kills each other or make sure they have meetings. I don't think that the character of Juna, first of all, I forget that name all the time. It's only because I read it on the back of the book that I even remember that. I just don't think she is a standout character. Juna and my Saint Etienne are in the pod together. We see honestly more of Saint Etienne being this character who is really determined to pull everything together, is having to do all these technical things. I think she honestly has more of a character, but even then it's not. I don't feel like these characters have much interiority. And then we actually switch to the perspective of the alien. Tell me why the alien has more of a character than the human beings. And the chapters of the alien are pretty short. And I'm just kind of frustrated because I wish that I cared about these characters more than just wanting them to be alive. I really wish that Adrian Tchaikovsky had put some work into having characters that feel fully fleshed out. I'm really hardly ever going to be a person who is such a huge fan of a book where the characters are not central to the plot. I think I can appreciate the amount of scientific research that would have had to go into this book, but if Tchaikovsky is not going to give me reason to care about these characters, I'm going to find it difficult to get through this.
Hello. I am 100 pages from the end of Shroud, but I just wanted to give a little update because I've shown you guys that I've been doing Ariel for over a year now, and I actually just graduated. I might put a video here, but I was really struggling. This was the end of class. I had just done the very last move in the syllabus and I was so gassed. I could barely lift myself up the whole class. I don't know how I was getting myself up there at all. I was really pushing myself so hard. And then at the end of class, after class had ended, I was you know what? I think I've got one more in me to do it on the other side. So that was me doing bow pose, which is the last bit of the curriculum of Sling 1. So now I'm going to be able to move up to Sling 2. I'll probably still alternate Sling 1 and Sling 2 classes while I'm still not like fully comfortable doing Sling 2 stuff. But I might also take some silks classes, which if you've seen that, that's like the 2 different separate fabrics and you tie yourself up to get up there, which I have been too scared to do. And I told myself once I graduated Sling 1 that I could try out silks 1, but I cannot believe that I am capable of doing that stuff now. Does it look nice? No, I am not a person who like would be doing the showcases or anything because I just don't have the finesse yet. But I'm really proud of myself. Like I mentioned, I am 100 pages from the end of Shroud. This actually ended up surprising me in what its structure is. I'm really glad that I decided to wait until today to give you my update because the last pages I read before bed yesterday, it had proceeded as expected. It had kind of been doing the same couple of things, and something changed at this point in the book that really surprised me. I thought I knew at what point the book was going to end, and it decided to do a different last act, which I thought is going to bring a much more interesting turn to this. It's going to be talking a little bit more of the politics of where our main characters are from. The human characters that we're following, they are from this company that like is so in control of all of their lives, and I'm not really sure how much of that is like what all of humanity is like when they are not actively on the job. Like if they are not out on an assignment, they are put into cryo sleep, which I think is really interesting. And I was disappointed that that wasn't coming up. The characters weren't being characters. And I do think that that has sustained into this new part. I do think the most interesting parts of this book is the alien chapters and seeing their frame of reference and how, because we see the humans interact with the aliens and how the humans think the aliens are weird, can't figure out the alien behavior, how they're like, oh, we don't know if they're actually intelligent or not because they can't communicate. Shroud is so dark that there's no light. So nothing that they can do other than like pulsing signals at them is able to communicate. And like they start doing the regular thing that you do with aliens of like you show them math and it's like, do you know math? The aliens don't know math. So they can't figure out how to communicate with each other. And so the aliens are having the exact same experience with the humans, saying, oh, we're not sure if they're intelligent. And it's not until like XYZ happens on either side that they can prove that the other one is intelligent. I think it's a little bit more of a realistic experience of like, this is a much harder thing to do in this book, which I think is interesting, but it also makes sense considering that like these people crash landed on this planet. They don't necessarily have the technology optimized to be able to do that when they are in a life or death situation. It has gotten easier to read as I get through, but I do wish it felt a little bit more emotional. I wonder if this is common for Adrian Tchaikovsky. You know what? I'm actually really optimistic for these last 100 pages that they are going to lean more into what I'm personally interested in reading about. So I am going to update you tomorrow, hopefully when I have finished this. Hello, welcome back to Cooking with Julie. I'm going to be giving you my final thoughts on Shroud while I make the crust for a pizza. I have been cooking so freaking much lately. I've been baking actually a lot lately. I used to bake all the time. I don't bake as much as I used to anymore because now I cook all the time. But in the last couple weeks, I have just been wanting to make pies. We had like a blueberry festival around us, so I made a blueberry pie, which is one of my favorite things. And then we went to a 4th of July party, and we had to bring a side, and I was like, I'll just make another fucking blueberry pie because nobody else will be bringing dessert, I'm sure. While we were shopping for 4th of July stuff, I saw that there was rhubarb, and I was like, I have to make a strawberry rhubarb pie. You can only make them like once or twice a year, and I haven't had one in ages. So here's some pictures of the pies that I made. The strawberry rhubarb pie was great. It did lean more strawberry because I underestimated the amount of rhubarb I needed, so it's a little sweeter than normal, but it was awesome. And I'm also going to be drinking a Pocas, P-O-C-A-S, bubble tea, canned, that I just got from an Asian market in town that I just went to the first time. They have so much stuff in there, dude. I'm gonna go back. I just found out that that Asian market that I went to actually does sell boba, so I might go there in the future. The other boba place in town, they only make ones that are 1,000,000 ounces. I'm like, I don't need that. Let's see how this is. This is great. This tastes exactly what I want like a brown sugar milk tea to taste like. Are there bobas in here though? It says that there are, but like I've shaken this and it doesn't seem like it. So Shroud. I do think that the last portion of the book, because it felt different than the rest of it, was like arguably the most exciting, but I actually wish that it went into more detail. Like we had so much detail. Like even before they crash land on the planet, they're so specific. I just was really surprised
at like where it decided to cut off. Do I think there was series potential for this? Maybe duology potential here, right? But like, I think those two books would have felt very different, and I do think the beginning and the end of this felt pretty different. I did like the kind of escalation that we got at the end of the book. Like, I thought that that was very appropriate for what was happening, and it brought back some of the stuff that we were talking about at the beginning that didn't seem like super duper relevant. Cool, I like that. However, it did feel like a sort of abrupt ending when, again, the rest of the book was so detailed. I would have liked the pacing of the book to be a little bit different. Did it need to be longer in order to incorporate that? Maybe. As much as I think that was the section of the book that I was like the most honed in on, the most specifically interested in, I think that this book feels a little bit unbalanced. But I really liked the sort of message at the end where we're talking about how we're acting towards an alien race that we're having problems communicating with. It did feel to me like a desolation called peace, which that one won the Hugo. Maybe people will really, really like that one. I did find out that this book was nominated for the Goodreads Choice Awards for sci-fi. It got 10th place, so that means it had enough to make it into the second round in top 10, but it got the least amount of votes from there on out. And then just salt. I really do think that the alien perspective of this book is the thing that is so notable. There are like shocking moments in this. There are definitely like little scary moments that I thought were good about this, but like, gotta wait for the water to warm up. I just really think that this book was missing something in the emotional department. I think that this book would have been really interesting to see if it was mostly the aliens' point of view and occasionally getting stuff from the humans, rather than mostly being from the human point of view, getting a little bit of the alien. Like, as much as it was like a really cool reveal to be like, oh my god, we're getting the perspective of the alien, which I've obviously spoiled to you, I think it's a selling point of the book, so I don't care if it spoils it. So a little bit less than this. I don't think this is going to win, but I feel like the fans of this book are going to be like the most diehard. I'm shaking the camera by kneading on the table. And also my triceps hurt way too bad to be kneading, but I could not bother to make sog today. Oh my god, I don't want to use the blender. If I didn't mention it, I'm going to be making my spinach Alfredo pizza. When I make pasta Alfredo, I make my own Alfredo sauce. But when I'm making pizza, I use jar Alfredo. Jar Alfredo, mozzarella, put some spinach on there. It's the best. I'm going to put this in a warm place, put a towel over it. This and the Incandescent are the books that I personally enjoyed myself the least of these 6 books. I'd say the Incandescent and Shroud are at the bottom tier. Death of the Author and A Drop of Corruption would be the middle tier. And Raven Scholar and Everlasting were 2 of my favorite books of last year. So I have my ranking of where I personally liked my time. The Incandescent is the only book on this list that I don't think is doing anything special. Every other one of these books I think is nominated for a reason. The fact that 5 out of 6, I agree with the nomination, that's cool. Like Shroud, as much as I don't enjoy it, it is like a really like thorough work of science fiction in the amount of work that he had to do to like explain the aliens and like all of the science of what the engineering they're doing to solve this problem and whatever. I totally get this being somebody's favorite book off this list. It is just not for me. And that's the great thing about being a reader, you know? And like being a person who is a person who talks about books is like, I can read a book and be like, I know that this was for this audience. Let's go to my research and predictions.
Big Guy and I are here to give you my research into the Hugo Awards, how the Hugo and Nebula and Locus are different, and what I think is going to win. So, what are the Hugo Awards? First of all, I've been talking this whole video about the Best Novel Awards. All of these awards are suites of awards, like the Oscars or the Grammys or the whatever, where it's multiple different awards. But the Hugo Awards were started in 1955. They were named after Hugo Gernsback, who you might know from being the person who created the Amazing Stories magazines. The Hugos are put on by and awarded at Worldcon, which is the World Science Fiction Convention. Of the major sci-fi fantasy awards, it's the oldest, which might be why it's considered the most reputable, or definitely the most well-known of them all. And it's also the widest reaching. So all of these awards are about writing, but the Hugos has writing that extends to like TV and games and stuff, which is cool. So each Worldcon is actually run independently of all of the other ones. It's based on the location, and the organizing all happens separately from previous ones. So that kind of makes the 2023 Hugos controversy make more sense, that the people who were there had more control over it, and this is something that won't roll over into future Hugos, hopefully. You can look into that yourself. And there's not like a central leadership of it either, which I thought was interesting. And this year's Hugos are going to be held on August 30th in LA. I was really under the impression that all of these literary awards were done like the Pulitzer or those sorts of awards, where it's like a small committee is chosen to read all of these books and read them all again and again until you come up with a list. But that's not actually how this works. The Hugos are essentially a popular vote award. The people who can nominate for the Hugo are the members of the previous or current Worldcon. And they can pick up to 5 nominees for each of the categories. Those get tallied up, and the top 6 in each category are chosen to be the nominees. The people who can vote for it are the members of the current Worldcon. They actually get to do ranked choice voting, which is unique to the Hugos of these 3 awards. So in order to be a member of Worldcon, you can pay to attend the convention. So for the whole weekend, that's over $200 for an adult. Or you can pay to attend it digitally, which I think is $85 this year. Or you can just straight up pay to only vote and not attend the con, which is $50. So you or I right now could spend $50 to vote for the Hugos. And last year there were just shy of 2,000 ballots cast. So it's a popular vote of this smaller collection of people. So really quick, I want to talk about how it's different from the Nebula and the Locus, because I didn't know anything about this. So the Nebula debuted in 1966, and it is run by the SFWA, which was originally the Science Fiction Writers Association, but it is now the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers Association. To be a full member, you have to have a catalog of paid science fiction, fantasy, general genre writing work that totals up to at least $1,000 US. And they also have annual fees. And then the same thing for an associate member, except it's $100 for your work. These people are the ones who vote on the Nebula. So it is actually a professionals award. The Hugos, and I'll talk later about the Locus, are like the Golden Globes, versus the Nebula is more like the Oscars or the SAG Awards. Only people who are in the industry and have worked in the industry lately can vote. So members can nominate any book that fits into the genre vaguely, as long as the book is not their own book. And they also nominate 6 books, except this year there seems to have been a tie in the best novel category because there were 7 nominees. And the Nebula was hosted on June 6th this year. Something different about the Nebula than the Hugo is that the Nebula also seems to allow horror titles in. Mexican Gothic was like the most recent horror novel that was nominated, and then this year 2 different horror novels were nominated, and one of them won, Buffalo Hunter x Hunter by Stephen Graham Jones. The other nominees were Catabasis, which was also nominated for the Locus, When We Were Real, which was also nominated by the Locus, which I had never heard of. I've read Catabasis. Sour Cherry, which is the other horror book. Wearing the Lion, which I have also read. And then Death of the Author and The Incandescent, which were nominated for all 3 awards. What I've noticed from the Nebula is they tend to be a little bit more skewed towards fantasy in their winners than science fiction like the Hugo is. However, I do think they tend to nominate the same group of people. They just don't agree most of the time on which one is the winner. Then we have the newest of the awards, the Locus, which came out in 1971, and shortly after, in 1980, they did something different. They actually split up their best novel category into best fantasy and best science fiction novels separate, and later they came out with the best horror category as well. And not only that, they also nominate 10 books per category versus 6 for the other awards. So they nominate every year 30 best novels versus the others are under 10. So the Locus is run by Locus magazine. So it used to be that only members or subscribers could vote in the Locus Awards, but they actually have opened it up to the public. However, if you are a member or subscriber, you get 2 times the weight to your vote as a person from the public. So if you wanted to, you or I could vote for this for free. Or if you want twice the vote, you can get an annual digital subscription for $48, which is cheaper than just getting a vote in the Hugo. Anyone can pick up to 5 works per category. The Locus were awarded on May 30th this year. These are all of the books that were nominated for fantasy, and these are all the books that were nominated for sci-fi, and these are all the books that were nominated for horror. And if you'll notice, every single book that was nominated for the Hugo has been nominated for the Locus. Our winners were The Everlasting for fantasy, Death of the Author for science fiction, and Buffalo Hunter Hunter for horror, which of course was the winner of the Nebula. Now I want to talk about the recent winners for the Hugos. I decided to go back all the way to 2014 and look at the books since then. If I go back any less, and I don't feel like I have a big enough data set, any more than that, and I start not knowing anything about the books because I was in literally 8th grade. Here are the previous winners of the Hugos last year back. The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett, the sequel's nominated this year. Some Desperate Glory by Emily Tesh, of course her second book is nominated this year. Nettle and Bone by T. Kingfisher, A Desolation Called Peace by Arkady Martine, Network Effect by Martha Wells, A Memory Called Empire by Arkady Martine, so we had a complete duology that won. The Calculating Stars by Mary Robinette Kowal, the entire Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin, back to back to back. It was the first series to ever do that and is the only trilogy to ever do that. And then The Three Body Problem in 2014. We do have a science fiction bias here. It is, believe it or not, a science fiction convention. Let's talk stats for the recent Hugo winners and nominees to see if there is some sort of statistical probability we can come up with of which is the most likely of these to win. Of the 12 most recent winners, 5 of them have been fantasy, 7 of them have been sci-fi. So you're thinking, oh, okay, the chances are about even. I don't think so. If you look at the fantasy winners, and 3 of them being of one series, I would argue 4 of those fantasy books are fantasy with a science fiction edge to them. The Broken Earth trilogy is like climate fiction. It has to do with like geology. I say Nettle and Bone's like fantasy horror, but it's just straight up fantasy. And then The Tainted Cup is fantasy where like biological grafts that are made out of like algae and bacteria and stuff are put on you. Like there is a science fiction lean to The Tainted Cup. If you take that into account, we now have 1 pure fantasy, 4 fantasy with sci-fi elements, and 7 science fictions. And if you take into account the series that were repeated and only do 1 entry per series, we've got 1 pure fantasy, 2 fantasy with sci-fi elements, and 6 sci-fi, which makes me think that they have a pretty strong sci-fi lean. Now we can look at the fantasy versus sci-fi in the nominations since 2014. So the first 2 years in this data set only have 5 nominees, and now we have 6. And now let's look at that with combination books listed out. And I got combination or what genre it was based on the Wikipedia page. If Wikipedia wasn't clear, I went to Goodreads. And if you notice, this is the first year in this time range in which there were more fantasy nominees than there were sci-fi nominees. Before it has been even, but it's never been majority fantasy. Fantasy has won in years where it's been even up. It's won in years where it was completely overshadowed by science fiction nominees. So I don't feel like there is a bias towards a genre based on the number of nominees. Next up, we're going to talk about series or not series. And I want to talk about how in 2017, the Hugos actually debuted the best series category, which I think is pretty cool. I want to talk about that for a second. In order to be nominated, a series must have a book out that year, duh. There has to be 3 books in that series at least, totaling 240,000 words or more altogether. And then actually, if you lose, you can then be nominated again at least 2 books later that are at least 240,000 words later. And actually, the Stormlight Archives has lost twice. The series that are nominated this year, I've only read one of them, and I've only heard of a couple of them in passing. And a lot of these books are not getting nominated for Best Novel either. Of series versus non-series. If you look at standalones versus first books in series versus sequel winners since 2014, we have 2, 6, and 4. Of course, with those repeating series. All 3 of the Broken Earth trilogy are included in here, and the T-Kalon duology, and that other sequel, Network Effect. Previous books had won Best Novella twice. All of these sequels were books that had already won, which our only sequel that was nominated this year is a sequel that has already won, so And if you look at years where standalones dominated the nominations, like this year, you get an even split, 2, 2, and 2. So I don't know that there's really a strong pull in any direction. There's nothing that we can eliminate. Of the previous winning authors, 7 of them were up for the award for the very first time. One of those people being a previous winner of Best Novella, but this is their first appearance in Best Novel. None of them had been nominated for Best Novel before, but not won. And 3 of them were repeat winners. So again, that's N.K. Jemisin and Arkady Martin. So of the 6 authors that we have in this round, 2 of them are previous winners of this awards. One of them is entirely a newcomer. One of them is a previous winner of Best Novella, who this is their first time getting nominated for Best Novel. One of them is a winner of Best Series, but lost it with 2 different books in 2025 for Best Novel. And one of them has lost Best Novel before and has not been nominated elsewhere. And in this time period, the 3 different awards have matched 3 different times. The Hugo and the Locus have matched on their own only 1 time. The Hugos and the Nebulas have never matched only on their own. And the Hugo has been unique 7 times. I honestly don't think that any of these stats are really going to have a lot of pull, but let's talk through each of the 6 books and the pros and cons that I think they all have, because I think they all have reasons for and against them. And also give you my review of these books summing up over my reading in the last year. So, A Drop of Corruption, this series is about this fantasy world where there are like these creatures called leviathans who are constantly trying to harm the people on land. And there is a magic system where people can use these grafts in order to essentially give them superpowers. And our main character is a Watson type character who has the ability to have total recall. And he starts working for a detective who is going around solving murders. Personally, I thought The Tainted Cup was just okay when everybody else was fawning over it. And then I actually really enjoyed book 2. I'm so glad I gave it another shot because I thought that the mystery was just much better constructed and the reader was much closer to what was actually going on in order to keep everything straight and actually be able to solve it yourself, even with the parameters of this being a sci-fi fantasy mystery, which can sometimes have the problem of the reader not understanding the logic of the world until the author just decides to introduce it to you at the last second. I really enjoyed this book. I think it's better than The Tainted Cup. However, do I think it deserves to win the Hugo on its own merit? Pros, we have precedent for sequels of previous winners winning. It's also fantasy with a science fiction spin, and it's the highest rated on Goodreads of these books, meaning the fans really liked this in comparison to book 1. However, on the cons, the series that have won all the way down the line in the Hugos are the series that like won across the board for all 3 awards. And I don't know that this series has that star power, but we won't even know that until the final book in the series. And in my personal opinion, I don't think that this did enough in the sci-fi fantasy world that was different from book 1. I don't want to say it's reheating nachos, but like the thing that I thought was much better about this book was the mystery. I thought the sci-fi fantasy stuff was just on par, kind of doing the same thing as book 1. So does it deserve a Hugo in and of itself? Then The Everlasting is possibly my favorite book on this list. We have our main character who is in a World War II type era in a fantasy world. He is inspired by this almost Camelot type story of Una the Everlasting, who is this female knight all those times ago at the founding of his nation. And he's inspired by her to go to war, gets injured, comes back, starts being a scholar of stories of her. And it's not going well until the Chancellor of War comes up to him and says, "Hey, I want you to write a story about her to do a new telling of the founding of our nation." And she actually sends him back in time, which is not a thing he knew was possible, to her time. And he's like, "Hi, Una, my hero, I'm gonna write a story about you." And she's like, "Okay, dude, whatever." This is a fantasy that has a really strong romantic plot line to it. It's something you really root for, but the speculative element of this book, the sort of sci-fi element that does come in of this time travel aspect, is so well done. And I thought the balances of all the different genres were incredible. This is one of the books that I have pushed onto the most people as of lately. Pros for it: it is fantasy with a sci-fi spin. it won the Locus, or is that going to hurt it? And it is the most popular of these books. It is the book that has been read the most and also shelved the most on Goodreads, meaning the most people who have not read it are interested in reading it. Cons against it: the author has lost before and never won a Hugo, unlike 4 of the other authors here. And also, it has that strong romantic angle, which I have not seen in any of the books that has won Best Novel. A lot of them have like a little bit of romance in them, but none of them are this strongly focused on a romantic relationship. And I think the men are going to be like, ew, gross cooties. Read the book, wimp. Then we have The Raven Scholar, which was one of my favorite books of last year as well. This was my vote in the final round of the Goodreads Choice Awards. This is a sort of more classic epic fantasy story where we have a competition for who is going to become the next emperor. Our main character is a person who's like lower class than everybody else around her, but has worked her way up to being the emperor's aide. And during the competition, there is a murder and she is implicated in it, and she is going to have to solve it herself. This book treads some familiar ground for a fantasy novel in its plot and especially in its setup, but what it really nails is its execution, particularly like the higher level writing style of how we are introducing information to the reader is so unique. And also there's a lot of unique narrative choices that happen towards the end that take this above and beyond its synopsis. And this could be a favorite series of mine, truly. So pros for this: newcomer author, and it's the highest rated non-sequel on the list. People really, really love this book. Against it is the fact that it's epic fantasy. There are other books here that are set in a fantastical world, but there's nothing that is this size, this scale, that is clearly going to be like a much longer series. Like the other things are fairly pared down in terms of high fantasy. And also like this more traditional plot line of a fantasy book, we have not seen win an award in this whole span of time. I just don't think that this is the genre match. If the Raven Scholar or the Everlasting win, it'll be like a first of a book feeling like this winning. Then we have Death of the Author, which is about a woman who is Black, she is disabled, and she is really struggling with what she wants to do with her life because she wants to be a writer and just it hasn't worked out for her. And when enough bad things happen to her in a row, the story just pours out of her, of the story of robots after humanity has died off. And she ends up publishing that. It becomes a overnight success. It's getting a movie adaptation and everything. And she is trying to wrestle with what is happening to her and her work, just mostly about her own identity when this is happening to her, and interspersed throughout, we get bits and pieces of her story. It's such a layered book. I read this book and my immediate thought was, this is going to win every award. But it feels literary. This author has won Best Novella before, and it's her first time up for Best Novel. It won the Locus. It was one of the 2 books that was nominated for all 3 awards. It's also science fiction. However, my only point against this book is that a lot of people complained that it wasn't science fiction enough. Are the people at the World Science Fiction Convention going to think that? I don't know. I don't know these people. Then we have The Incandescent, which you've heard my thoughts on. This author was a previous winner and was nominated for all 3 awards. But what are the points against it? It's the least read of all of these books. It's the lowest rated of all of these books. And in my opinion, it is the only book on this list that isn't doing anything special. Literally all the other books on this list, I think, is doing something innovative in the sci-fi fantasy sphere. I do not know why this book was nominated for all 3 awards because it just isn't doing something different. And lastly, we have Shroud, which again, I have talked about. Pros, it's science-y sci-fi, which I think is in line with the genre of what people might want to vote for. And this author has won Best Series before. However, it is the least shelved of all of these books, meaning the least people know about it and want to read it coming up. And this author has lost before. In my professional opinion, which is not very professional, I think that the book that has the least things stacked against it, the least question marks, is Death of the Author. I think Death of the Author has a lot of things going for it, especially because, like in previous years, the most read book by the general public was not the winner. That is really not a be-all end-all indicator like it is for the Goodreads Choice Awards. That is my personal prediction, although again, I think that 5 of these books are really deserving of it. Sorry, The Incandescent, I wish I liked you more. What would I want to win? The Raven Scholar and The Everlasting. Those are the ones that I would want to win because I think they are the best, most fleshed out, fully like doing everything you're supposed to do and being innovative in the sphere. The Everlasting has already won the Locus, so best case scenario for me, I would love the Raven Scholar to win because I think that this deserves to have award recognition that I have not seen it get elsewhere. Thank you so much for watching. Please let me know, have you read any of these books, which one you think is going to win and which one you want to win. And you now have a month to read these books before the Hugos start, and probably about a month if you want to decide to go to or choose to vote in the Hugos. Let me know if you end up doing that. And I'll probably get my reaction to finding out who ended up winning and make a reel out of that or something. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to find me anywhere, you can find me at the links in the description. If you'd like to continue watching my videos, I would love it if you would subscribe. It means a whole lot. And if you really like this video and you want to help get it to other people, like, comment, and really hyping up a video is something that the algorithm is really pushing right now. So I would appreciate if you did that. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.
Uh-oh.